The Daily Mail's shameless attempt to redirect blame onto Prince Harry and Meghan for Archbishop Welby's resignation represents a grotesque manipulation of the actual systemic failures within the Church of England. While the newspaper breathlessly fabricates narratives about the Sussexes' supposed spell over Welby, they conveniently ignore the substantive issue of decades-long sexual abuse cover-ups that truly precipitated his resignation. The real scandal is not Welby's friendship with the Sussexes, but the systematic protection of perpetrators like John Smith and Prince Andrew, whose egregious actions have been repeatedly whitewashed by an establishment more concerned with preserving appearances than delivering true accountability. The Daily Mail's latest journalistic low comes into sharp focus with their cynical attempt to redirect attention from the systemic sexual abuse within the Church of England by weaponizing Prince Harry and Meghan's relationship with Archbishop Justin Welby. In a transparent and grotesque manipulation of public sentiment, the tabloid seeks to transform the deeply serious issue of institutional child sexual abuse into a sensationalist narrative about royal friendships, conveniently overlooking the grotesque failings of church leadership. Welby's purported friendship with Harry and Meghan became a convenient smokescreen for the Daily Mail's sensationalist narrative, strategically deflecting from the far more serious institutional failures of child abuse cover-ups within the Church of England. Despite the Mail's attempts to paint the Archbishop's relationship with the Sussexes as some form of compromising entanglement, the reality reveals a much more nuanced connection. Welby had indeed officiated the Sussexes' wedding and later christened their son Archie, demonstrating pastoral support that was misconstrued as undue influence. His sympathetic comments about the royal family's treatment of Harry and Meghan, such as describing royal life as life without parole, were genuine pastoral observations rather than the manipulative interference the tabloid portrayed. The Daily Mail's claim that Welby had completely fallen under their spell represents a transparent attempt to redirect public scrutiny away from the systemic institutional failures and child abuse cover-ups that ultimately led to his resignation, instead sensationalizing a peripheral relationship with the Sussexes to generate inflammatory headlines that would appeal to their readership's pre-existing biases. Royal hypocrisy, the selective outrage of the Windsor clan. Justin Welby's long-standing relationship with the royal family reveals a staggering double standard that exposes the true nature of Windsor privilege. While the Daily Mail frantically attempts to deflect blame onto Harry and Meghan, the uncomfortable truth remains that Welby has been intimately connected with Charles and William for years, officiating pivotal royal ceremonies including Prince William's wedding, christenings for the Wales children, and even King Charles III's coronation. The irony is palpable. These same royals who now seemingly distance themselves from Welby have relied on his pastoral support and ceremonial expertise for decades, demonstrating a breathtaking level of institutional hypocrisy. While Prince Andrew's well-documented associations with Jeffrey Epstein have been repeatedly minimized and protected, the Archbishop's momentary sympathy for Harry and Meghan becomes the convenient scapegoat for institutional failures. The royal machinery's selective accountability becomes glaringly evident. Sexual predation within royal circles receives tepid responses, yet a nuanced friendship with marginalized royals becomes grounds for public excoriation, revealing a toxic system of protection that privileges powerful men while systematically undermining those who challenge its corrupt foundations. The Catholic Church's history of sexual abuse cover-ups presents a stark parallel to the Church of England's recent scandal, revealing a disturbing pattern of institutional protection that far exceeds Justin Welby's singular narrative. While the Daily Mail obsessively targets Harry and Meghan as a distraction, the Independent report's findings expose a far more sinister truth about systemic abuse and institutional complicity. The report explicitly detailed how evangelist barrister John Smith systematically groomed and abused over 100 children and young men, with Welby himself having direct knowledge and connection to these camps in the 1970s. Unlike the Vatican, where multiple popes have escaped meaningful accountability despite widespread sexual abuse scandals, Welby's resignation represents a rare moment of institutional accountability. The irony is profound. While the media fixates on royal dynamics and Welby's friendship with the Sussexes, the real story is the decades-long suppression of traumatic experiences of abuse survivors whose pain was repeatedly silenced by powerful institutional mechanisms designed to protect perpetrators rather than victims. Religious institutions' systemic abuse, a pattern of institutional betrayal. The pervasive pattern of institutional sexual abuse within religious organizations represents a deeply troubling systemic failure that extends far beyond the Church of England, revealing a consistent global tendency to prioritize institutional reputation over the protection of vulnerable individuals. From the Catholic Church's decades-long global sexual abuse cover-ups to the Anglican Church's recent scandals, these institutions have repeatedly demonstrated a distressing institutional culture of silencing victims, protecting perpetrators, and maintaining a facade of moral authority while concealing grave systemic misconduct. The Daily Mail's cynical attempt to deflect attention from the substantive issues of institutional abuse by focusing on Justin Welby's relationship with Harry and Meghan epitomizes a broader media strategy of sensationalism and misdirection, effectively undermining the serious conversations necessary about accountability, transparency, and fundamental institutional reform. This pattern of institutional betrayal not only re-traumatizes victims but also erodes public trust in religious leadership. The weight of accountability leadership in the face of institutional failure. In a remarkable display of leadership rarely witnessed in contemporary institutional circles, Archbishop Justin Welby's decision to take personal and institutional responsibility for the systemic sexual abuse within the Church of England represents a critical moment of moral reckoning. Welby's resignation demonstrates a profound understanding that true accountability transcends superficial media narratives. By publicly acknowledging the long and re-traumatizing period between 2013 and 2024, he has set a precedent that stands in stark contrast to the royal family's historical tendency to protect its own, particularly in cases involving figures like Prince Andrew, whose egregious actions have been systematically shielded from meaningful consequence. While his resignation may not entirely repair the deep wounds inflicted on abuse survivors, it represents a crucial first step in institutional transparency, a principle seemingly foreign to a monarchy that has repeatedly prioritized reputation over justice. The Daily Mail's sensationalist framing exemplifies a broader pattern of institutional deflection, where legitimate investigations into profound institutional failures are systematically transformed into gossip-driven character assassinations. By highlighting Welby's friendship with the Sussexes as a primary narrative, media outlets intentionally obscure the fundamental issue: decades of institutional cover-ups of child sexual abuse within the Church of England. This calculated misdirection serves multiple purposes. It maintains a toxic media ecosystem that continues to target Harry and Meghan while simultaneously protecting powerful institutional actors who have historically enabled and concealed systematic abuse. The irony is further compounded by the royal family's own complicated history with accountability, particularly regarding Prince Andrew's well-documented associations with Jeffrey Epstein, which have received comparatively minimal sustained scrutiny. Institutional hypocrisy, when power protects itself at the expense of victims. The resignation of Archbishop Justin Welby exposes a deeply troubling pattern of systemic hypocrisy within powerful institutions, where accountability is selectively applied and victims are often silenced. The Daily Mail's attempted narrative shift, blaming Welby's downfall on his relationship with Harry and Meghan, demonstrates a shameful deflection from the real issue: decades of institutional sexual abuse cover-ups. This misdirection reveals a calculated strategy to protect established power structures by vilifying marginalized voices, in this case, the Sussexes, who have consistently challenged royal orthodoxy. The irony is stark. While Welby is held accountable for his institutional failures, other members of the royal establishment, such as Prince Andrew, who was credibly accused of sexual misconduct, remain largely unscathed. The royal family's selective outrage and the media's complicit reporting highlight a disturbing double standard. where powerful men are often shielded from genuine consequences, and institutions prioritize reputation over the traumatic experiences of abuse survivors.